Welcome, I'm your host, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. The Adventure of Shoscombe Old Place, an expanded account by John H. Watson, M.D. Chapter 1. The Microscope and the Turf. The spring of 1902 brought with it an unusual melancholy to our chambers in Baker Street. The weather had been unseasonably grey, and even the usually bustling thoroughfare below seemed subdued beneath the persistent drizzle that had plagued London for the better part of a fortnight. It was upon one such dreary afternoon that I found Sherlock Holmes hunched over his work table, his long, nervous fingers adjusting the brass screws of a low-power microscope with the precision of a watchmaker. For the better part of 3 hours he had maintained this posture, moving only to make occasional notes in his leather-bound journal, or to prepare fresh slides from a collection of specimens that cluttered the table before him. The air was thick with the acrid smell of various chemicals, and I had long since abandoned my chair by the window to pace the room, my wound from Afghanistan troubling me more than usual in the damp weather. "Really, Holmes," I ventured at last, unable to contain my restlessness, "if you persist in this examination much longer, you shall require the services of an oculist, as well as those of whoever has brought you this curious case." My companion did not immediately respond, but I detected the faint twitch of amusement at the corner of his thin lips. At length, he straightened himself with a slight groan, pressing his hands against the small of his back, and turned to face me with an expression of unmistakable triumph. "It is glue, Watson," said he, his grey eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Unquestionably it is glue. Have a look at these scattered objects in the field." I approached the microscope with the dutiful air of one who has learned, through long association, that Holmes's enthusiasms must be indulged, even when their significance remains obscure to the ordinary observer. Stooping to the eyepiece, I adjusted the focus for my vision and studied the magnified field before me. "Those hairs are threads from a tweed coat," I observed, recalling the methods Holmes had taught me over the years. "The irregular grey masses are dust. There are epithelial scales on the left. Those brown blobs in the centre are undoubtedly glue." "Capital, Watson," Holmes exclaimed, clapping his hands together. "You have become quite the microscopist. Your observations are entirely correct." "Well," I said, laughing as I straightened up and returned to my chair, "I am prepared to take your word for the identification. Does anything depend upon it? Or is this merely another of your chemical experiments?" "It is a very fine demonstration," he answered, moving to his armchair and lighting his pipe with evident satisfaction. "In the St. Pancras case you may remember that a cap was found beside the dead policeman. The accused man denies that it is his, but he is a picture frame maker who habitually handles glue." The mention of the case brought it back to my mind with clarity. The murder of Constable Jeremiah Barnes had been reported in all the newspapers some 3 weeks prior, and the subsequent arrest of Albert Finch, a respectable tradesman, had caused considerable public interest. "I recall the case," said I. "The prosecution's case seemed rather weak from what I read in the Times. Is it one of yours?" "No. My friend Merivale of the Yard asked me to look into the matter as a favour. Since I ran down that coiner by the zinc and copper filings in the seam of his cuff, they have begun to realise the importance of the microscope in criminal investigation." He drew deeply on his pipe and exhaled a cloud of blue smoke toward the ceiling. "The examination has been most instructive. The glue particles found in the cap's seam are identical in composition to those used by Finch in his daily work. Moreover, I have discovered traces of rosewood dust, a wood he was working with on the very day of the murder." "Then the man is guilty?" "I did not say that, Watson. I merely observed that he handled the cap. Whether he wore it whilst committing murder is quite another matter. There are several curious aspects to the case that suggest a more complex explanation, but Merivale is capable enough to pursue those lines of inquiry. He glanced impatiently at his watch, a handsome gold timepiece that had been a gift from a grateful European monarch whose name Holmes would never divulge. I had a new client calling at 3 o'clock, but he is now 20 minutes overdue. By the way, Watson, you know something of racing, do you not? This sudden shift in topic was characteristic of Holmes, whose mind could leap from one subject to another with startling rapidity. I smiled, thinking of the various betting slips currently residing in my desk drawer, most of them representing losses. I ought to know something of it, I replied ruefully. I pay for my education with about half my wound pension. Then I'll make you my handy guide to the turf, said Holmes with amusement. What about Sir Robert Norberton? Does the name recall anything? I settled more comfortably in my chair, grateful for a topic that did not require squinting through microscopes. Well, I should say so. He lives at Shoscombe Old Place, and I know it well, for my summer quarters were down there once some years ago now. It's in Berkshire, in the heart of the Downs. Norberton nearly came within your province once. How was that? Holmes leaned forward with interest, his pipe forgotten in his hand. It was when he horsewhipped Sam Brewer, the well-known Curzon Street moneylender, on Newmarket Heath. He nearly killed the man. It was quite the scandal at the time. Must have been 7 or 8 years ago. The newspapers were full of it for weeks. Ah, he sounds interesting. Does he often indulge in that sort of behaviour? I paused, collecting my memories of the man and the stories I'd heard during my brief residence in that part of Berkshire. Well, he has the name of being a dangerous man. He is about the most daredevil rider in England. Came second in the Grand National a few years back, which I believe was in '99. Rode his own horse, as I recall. And the creature nearly killed him when it fell at Becker's Brook. He remounted and finished the race despite a suspected broken rib. A man of considerable determination then. More than that, Holmes. He is one of those men who have overshot their true generation. He should have been a buck in the days of the Regency. A boxer, an athlete, a plunger on the turf, a lover of fair ladies, and by all accounts so far down Queer Street that he may never find his way back again. Holmes nodded thoughtfully, making a steeple of his fingers. Capital, Watson. A thumbnail sketch worthy of your literary efforts. I seem to know the man already. Now, can you give me some idea of Shoscombe Old Place? Only that it is in the centre of Shoscombe Park, and that the famous Shoscombe stud and training quarters are to be found there. No, the estate has been in the same family for generations. The Folders, I believe. The grounds are extensive, perhaps 300 acres, with the old chapel you sometimes see mentioned in the county histories. And the head trainer, said Holmes, reaching for an envelope on the mantelpiece, is John Mason. You need not look surprised at my knowledge, Watson, for this is a letter from him which I am unfolding. But let us have some more about Shoscombe. I seem to have struck a rich vein. I searched my memory, recalling the local gossip from my time in the area. There are the Shoscombe Spaniels, said I. You hear of them at every dog show, the most exclusive breed in England. They are the special pride of the lady of Shoscombe Old Place. Sir Robert Norberton's wife, I presume? Sir Robert has never married. Just as well, I think. Sir, considering his prospects. He lives with his widowed sister, Lady Beatrice Folder. Holmes raised his eyebrows. You mean that she lives with him? No. The place belonged to her late husband, Sir James Folder. Norberton has no claim on it at all. It is only a life interest and reverts to her husband's brother. Meantime, she draws the rents every year. And Brother Robert, I suppose, spends the said rents. That is about the size of it. He is a devil of a fellow and must lead her a most uneasy life, yet I have heard that she is devoted to him. But what is amiss at Shoscombe? Ah, that is just what I want to know, and here, I expect, is the man who can tell us. The sound of footsteps ascending the 17 steps to our landing had reached even my ears, and a moment later there came a firm knock upon our door. At Holmes's call to enter, Mrs. Hudson showed in a tall, clean-shaven man with the firm, austere expression which is only seen upon those who have to control horses or boys. Mr. John Mason had many of both under his sway, and he looked equal to the task. He bowed with cold self-possession and seated himself upon the chair to which Holmes had waved him. Chapter 2. The Trainer's Tale. Our visitor was a man of perhaps 50 years, with the weathered complexion of one who spends his days outdoors in all seasons. His hands, which rested upon his knees, were large and capable, bearing the small scars and calluses that come from a lifetime of working with horses. He wore a suit of good but conservative cut, and his boots, though polished, showed the marks of country wear. "You had my note, Mr. Holmes?" he began, his voice carrying the slight burr of the West Country. "Yes, but it explained nothing beyond your desire for a consultation. It was too delicate a thing for me to put the details on paper, and too complicated. It was only face to face I could do it." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I must confess, Mr. Holmes, I was uncertain whether to come at all. I am a man who keeps his own counsel, and it goes against my nature to discuss my employer's affairs with strangers." "You may speak freely here, Mr. Mason," said Holmes reassuringly. "Dr. Watson and I are the souls of discretion. Indeed, we are professionally bound to maintain confidentiality in all matters brought before us." Mason nodded slowly, though his discomfort was evident. "Very well, gentlemen, I'll be plain with you. First of all, Mr. Holmes, now I think that my employer, Sir Robert, has gone mad." Holmes raised his eyebrows slightly, but his tone remained neutral. "This is Baker Street, not Harley Street," said he. "But why do you say so?" "Well, sir, when a man does one queer thing, or two queer things, there may be a meaning to it, but when everything he does is queer, then you begin to wonder. I believe Shoscombe Prince and the Derby have turned his brain." "That is a cult you are running?" The trainer's face lit up with professional pride despite his evident distress. "The best in England, Mr. Holmes. I should know, if anyone does. I've been training horses for 30 years, and I've never seen the like of the Prince. He's got heart, stamina, and speed in equal measure. On the gallops he moves like poetry. Why, just last week—" He stopped himself, as if realizing he'd been carried away by enthusiasm. Holmes smiled encouragingly. "Pray continue, Mr. Mason. Your assessment of the horse's qualities may be more relevant than you suppose." "Well, sir, what I was going to say is that last week I had him out with Sir Humphrey Dacre's colt, Meridian, who's considered one of the favourites for the Derby. We gave them a full mile and a half, and the Prince beat him by 5 lengths without being pressed. Sir Humphrey was so impressed he tried to buy him on the spot, offered £12,000. And Sir Robert refused, I take it." "Refused?" He laughed in Sir Humphrey's face, said he wouldn't take 20,000, and that's where the madness comes in, you see. Now I'll be plain with you, for I know you are gentlemen of honour, and that it won't go beyond this room. Then Sir Robert has got to win this Derby. He's up to the neck, and it's his last chance. Everything he could raise or borrow is on the horse, and at fine odds too. You can get 40s now, but it was nearer the 100 when he began to back him." "But how is that, if the horse is so good?" I interjected. Mason turned to me with a grim smile. "That's the cleverness of it, Doctor. The public don't know how good he is. Sir Robert has been too clever for the touts. He has the prince's half-brother out for spins. You can't tell them apart to look at, both being dark bays with white blazes. But there are 2 lengths in a furlong between them when it comes to a gallop. The punters see what they think is Shoscombe Prince being beaten in the trials, and the odds lengthen. An ingenious deception, remarked Holmes. Somewhat dishonourable, perhaps, but ingenious nonetheless. Sir Robert thinks of nothing but the horse and the race. His whole life is on it. He's holding off the Jews till then. If the prince fails him, he is done. It seems a rather desperate gamble, I observed. But where does the madness come in? Mason leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a more confidential tone. Well, first of all, you have only to look at him. I don't believe he sleeps at night. He is down at the stables at all hours. Sometimes I arrive at 4 in the morning and find him in the prince's stall, just sitting there in the straw, staring at the horse. His eyes are wild, Mr. Holmes, feverish, like a man in the grip of an obsession. It has all been too much for his nerves. And then there is his conduct to Lady Beatrice. Ah, what is that? Mason hesitated, choosing his words carefully. They have always been the best of friends. Despite Sir Robert's wild ways, there was genuine affection between them. They had the same tastes, the 2 of them, and she loved the horses as much as he did. Every day at the same hour, 10:30 in the morning, she would drive down to see them. She knew every horse in the stable by name, could recite their pedigrees better than I could myself. And above all, she loved the prince. He would prick up his ears when he heard the wheels on the gravel, and he would trot out each morning to the carriage to get his lump of sugar. She always brought him special ones, bought from that confectioner's in Newbury. But that's all over now. Why? Well, she seems to have lost all interest in the horses. Yeah, for a week now she has driven past the stables with never so much as good morning. The carriage doesn't even slow down anymore. It's as if the stables, the horses, everything she once cared for has ceased to exist for her. You think there has been a quarrel? And a bitter, savage, spiteful quarrel at that. Why else would he give away her pet spaniel that she loved as if he were her child? He gave it a few days ago to old Barnes, what keeps the Green Dragon 3 miles off at Crendell. That certainly did seem strange, Holmes murmured, making a note in his pocket-book. Of course, with her weak heart and dropsy, one couldn't expect that she could get about with him as she used to, Mason continued. She hasn't walked unaided for the better part of 2 years, but he used to spend 2 hours every evening in her room. They would sit together, talking of the old days, of horses and hunting. He might well do what he could, for she has been a rare good friend to him. When he was at his lowest 5 years back, when the creditors were circling like vultures, it was Lady Beatrice who held them off. She paid his debts to the tune of £15,000, though it meant selling off half her jewellery and some of the estate's finest paintings. But that's all over too. He never goes near her now, and she takes it to heart. She is brooding and sulky and drinking, Mr. Holmes. Drinking like a fish. Did she drink before this estrangement? Well, she took her glass, as many ladies do. A sherry before dinner, perhaps a glass of port afterward, but now it is often a whole bottle of an evening. So Stevens, the butler, told me. It's all changed, Mr. Holmes. Yeah, and there is something damned rotten about it. But then again, what is Master doing down at the old church crypt at night? And who is the man that meets him there? Holmes rubbed his hands together with evident satisfaction. Go on, Mr. Mason. You get more and more interesting. It was the butler who saw him go first. Stevens is an old man, nearly 70, but he's loyal to the family and sharp as a tack. He sleeps in a room at the back of the house, overlooking the park. He's a light sleeper, troubled by rheumatism, and he often looks out his window during the night. It was last Monday, near midnight, and it was raining hard. He saw a figure leaving the house by the side door carrying a lantern. At first, he thought it might be one of the stable lads, though what business they'd have out at that hour he couldn't imagine. But then the figure passed beneath a lamp, and Stevens recognised Sir Robert's bearing. The way he walks, you know, very upright, almost military. And where did he go? Stevens couldn't see from his window, but he was troubled enough to mention it to me the next morning. So the following night, I was up at the house, keeping watch. Sure enough, just before midnight, Master came out of the side door again. This time I was ready. I had Stevens with me, and we followed at a distance. A dangerous undertaking if Sir Robert is as formidable as Dr. Watson suggests. You have the right of it there, Mr. Holmes. It was jumpy work, for it would have been a bad job if he had seen us. He's a terrible man with his fists if he gets started, and no respecter of persons. I've seen him knock down a stable lad who gave him cheek. He laid him out cold with a single blow. So we were shy of getting too near, but we marked him down all right. It was the haunted crypt that he was making for, and there was a man waiting for him there. What is this haunted crypt? I asked, my interest thoroughly aroused. Mason turned to me, and I saw genuine unease in his expression. Well, sir, there is an old ruined chapel in the park, about a quarter-mile from the main house. It is so old that nobody could fix its date. Some say Saxon, others Norman. The roof fell in during the last century, and it's been left to decay. And under it there's a crypt which has a bad name among us. It's a dark, damp, lonely place by day, but there are few in that county that would have the nerve to go near it at night. Superstitious talk, surely, Holmes interjected. Perhaps, sir, Tossus, but there are stories. Old Maggie Cooper, who was housekeeper before she passed on, swore she heard voices from there one All Hallows Eve, and Tom Simmons, one of the gardeners, claimed he saw lights moving about in there, though when he went to investigate the next morning, there was no sign that anyone had been there. Marsh gas, most likely, said Holmes dismissively. The phosphorescent exhalation from decaying organic matter is often mistaken for supernatural phenomena, but continue with your account. Well, sir, Master's not afraid of such things. He never feared anything in his life. But what is he doing there in the night time? And who is this stranger he meets? Wait a bit, said Holmes, leaning forward with keen interest. You say there is another man there. It must be one of your own stable men. Or someone from the house. Surely you have only to spot who it is and question him. It's no one I know. How can you say that? Because I have seen him, Mr. Holmes. It was on that second night. Sir Robert turned and passed us, me and Stevens, quaking in the bushes like two bunny rabbits, for there was a bit of moon that night. But we could hear the other moving about behind. We were not afraid of him, whoever he was. So we stepped out when Sir Robert was gone, and pretended we were just having a walk in the moonlight, and so we came right on him as casual and innocent as you please. And what did you see? Hello, mate. Who may you be? Says I. I guess he'd not heard us coming, so he looked over his shoulder with a face as if he had seen the devil coming out of hell. He let out a yell. More and away he went as hard as he could lick it in the darkness. He could run, I'll give him that. In a minute he was out of sight and hearing, and who he was or what he was we never found. But you saw him clearly in the moonlight. Yes, I would swear to his yellow face. A mean dog, I should say. Oriental looking, if you understand me. High cheekbones, narrow eyes, a thin moustache. Not English, that's for certain. What could such a man have in common with Sir Robert? Holmes sat for some time lost in thought, his fingers pressed together in his characteristic pose. I could see his mind working through the problem, sorting and cataloguing the information like a clerk arranging files. "Who keeps Lady Beatrice Falder company?" he asked at last. "There is her maid, Carrie Evans. She's been with her this 5 years." "And is, no doubt, devoted?" Mr. Mason shuffled uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes not meeting Holmes's steady gaze. "She's devoted enough," he answered at last, "but I won't say to whom." "Ah," said Holmes, a world of meaning in that single syllable. "I can't tell tales out of school," Mason protested weakly. "I quite understand, Mr. Mason. Of course, the situation is clear enough. From Dr. Watson's description of Sir Robert, I can realise that no woman is safe from him. Don't you think the quarrel between brother and sister may lie there? Well, the scandal has been pretty clear for a long time. Among the servants, at least, it's common knowledge. But Lady Beatrice may not have seen it before. Let us suppose that she has suddenly found it out. She wants to get rid of the woman. Her brother will not permit it. The invalid, with her weak heart and inability to get about, has no means of enforcing her will. The hated maid is still tied to her. The lady refuses to speak, sulks, takes to drink. Sir Robert, in his anger, takes her pet spaniel away from her. Does not all this hang together? Well, it might do, so far as it goes. Exactly, as far as it goes. How would all that bear upon the visits by night to the old crypt? We can't fit that into our plot. No, sir, and there's something more that I can't fit in. Mason paused, and I saw him steel himself for his next revelation. Why should Sir Robert want to dig up a dead body? Holmes sat up abruptly, his grey eyes suddenly alert. What do you mean? We only found it out yesterday, after I'd written to you. Yesterday Sir Robert had gone to London, so Stevens and I went down to the crypt. Oh, it was all in order, sir, except that in one corner was a bit of a human body. You informed the police, I suppose? Our visitor smiled grimly. Well, sir, I think it would hardly interest them. It was just the head and a few bones of a mummy. It may have been 1,000 years old, but it wasn't there before. That I'll swear, and so will Stevens. We know that crypt well enough. It's been part of our duties to check it quarterly for structural damage on account of the estate's insurance. It had been stowed away in a corner and covered over with a board, but that corner had always been empty before. What did you do with it? Well, we just left it there. Seemed the wisest course. We didn't want Sir Robert to know we'd been snooping about. That was wise indeed. You say Sir Robert was away yesterday. Has he returned? We expect him back today, on the evening train from London. When did Sir Robert give away his sister's dog? It was just a week ago today, last Tuesday. The creature was howling outside the old well house, and Sir Robert was in one of his tantrums that morning. The prince had thrown a shoe during the morning gallop, which put him in a foul mood. He caught up the dog, and I thought he would have killed it. Then he gave it to Sandy Bain, the jockey, and told him to take the dog to old Barnes at the Green Dragon, for he never wished to see it again. Holmes sat for some time in silent thought. He had lit the oldest and foulest of his pipes, and the room was beginning to fill with the thick, acrid smoke that I had long since learned to tolerate. I am not clear yet what you want me to do in this matter, Mr. Mason, he said at last. Can't you make it more definite? Perhaps this will make it more definite, Mr. Holmes, said our visitor. He took a paper from his pocket and, unwrapping it carefully, he exposed a charred fragment of bone. Holmes examined it with interest, holding it up to the light and studying it from various angles. Where did you get this? There is a central heating furnace in the cellar under Lady Beatrice's room. It's been off for some time. We don't usually light it until October, but Sir Robert complained of cold 3 days ago and had it on again. Harvey runs it. He's one of my lads, helps with the horses, but also serves as odd job man about the house. This very morning he came to me with this, which he found raking out the cinders. He didn't like the look of it. "Nor do I," said Holmes gravely. What do you make of it, Watson?" I took the fragment from Holmes and examined it carefully. It was burned to a black cinder, but there could be no question as to its anatomical significance. "It's the upper condyle of a human femur," said I, "the thigh bone, and from its size I would say it came from an adult, probably female given the relative delicacy of the structure." "Exactly." Holmes had become very serious, his face losing its usual expression of detached interest. "When does this lad tend to the furnace?" "He makes it up every evening around 8 o'clock and then leaves it. It burns through the night." "Then anyone could visit it during the night?" "Yes, sir. The cellar is accessible from both inside and outside the house." "Can you enter it from outside?" "There is one door from outside near the old well house. There is another which leads up by a stair to the passage in which Lady Beatrice's room is situated." "These are deep waters, Mr. Mason. Deep and rather dirty." Holmes rose and began pacing the room, his pipe sending up clouds of smoke. "You say that Sir Robert was not at home last night?" "No, sir. He was in London." "Then whoever was burning bones, it was not he." "That's true, sir. Unless, of course, he had an accomplice." "What is the name of that inn you spoke of?" "The Green Dragon." "Is the good fishing in that part of Berkshire?" The honest trainer showed very clearly upon his face that he was convinced that yet another lunatic had come into his harassed life. "Well, sir, I've heard there are trout in the mill stream and pike in the Hall Lake." "That's good enough. Watson and I are famous fishermen, are we not?" "Watson, you may address us in future at the Green Dragon. We should reach it tonight. I need not say that we don't want to see you, Mr. Mason, but a note will reach us, and no doubt I could find you if I want you. When we have gone a little farther into the matter, I will let you have a considered opinion." Chapter 3. Journey to Shoscombe. After Mason had departed, Holmes stood for some time at the window, watching the traffic in Baker Street with unseeing eyes. I knew this mood of old. The intense concentration, the mental sifting of evidence, the formulation of theories that would later be tested against hard facts. "What do you make of it, Watson?" he asked at last, without turning from the window. "It seems a most extraordinary business. If I understand correctly, you suspect foul play?" "I suspect nothing yet, though I observe much. We have a desperate man gambling everything on a horse race. We have a sudden estrangement between brother and sister. We have mysterious midnight meetings in a haunted crypt. We have ancient bones appearing where none were before, and modern bones being burned in a furnace. We have a spaniel given away, a maid who may be more than a maid, and a sister who has taken to drink. Oh yes, Watson, it is a most complex web, and I am eager to examine each strand. But surely the burned bone is the most significant element. It suggests several possibilities, Watson. Let us not jump to conclusions. We must gather more data before we theorize. I have often warned you of the danger of theorizing before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories, instead of theories to suit facts. Then you have no theory at all? I have several, each one more fantastic than the last, but I shall keep them to myself until we have visited Shoscombe and seen the ground for ourselves. Now, I suggest you pack a bag for 2 or 3 days. Include your service revolver, if you please. I have a feeling this case may not be entirely without danger. You think Sir Robert might prove violent? Sir Robert or another? There are mysterious strangers haunting crypts, Watson. It would be as well to be prepared. I went to my room and made my preparations, including, as Holmes had suggested, my old army revolver and a box of cartridges. When I returned to our sitting room, I found Holmes had changed into his travelling clothes and was cramming fishing tackle into a large bag. "I thought we were using fishing as a pretext," I observed. "My dear Watson, one should never neglect an opportunity for actual fishing when the pretext provides one. I have it on good authority that the trout in those Berkshire streams are quite exceptional at this time of year. Besides, the more authentic our cover, the less likely we are to arouse suspicion. We caught the 4:15 from Paddington, securing a first-class compartment to ourselves. As the train pulled away from the station and we settled into our seats, Holmes produced a small notebook from his pocket. "Let me review the facts as we know them," he said. "First, the principals. Sir Robert Norberton, a man of good family but wild temperament, deeply in debt, with everything riding on a Derby winner. A violent man, given to horsewhipping moneylenders and striking stable boys. No moral scruples when it comes to cheating the betting public. A man of action rather than reflection." He paused to make a note, then continued. "Lady Beatrice Fulder, his sister, a widow, owner of the estate by virtue of her late husband's will, an invalid, suffering from dropsy and heart disease, cannot walk unaided, formerly devoted to her brother and to horses, particularly to Shoscombe Prince, now estranged from both. Carrie Evans, her maid of 5 years' standing, devoted but perhaps not to her mistress. Scandal connects her name with Sir Robert's. The source of the estrangement?" Another note then. "The mysterious stranger, Oriental in appearance, meets Sir Robert in the crypt at midnight. Identity and purpose unknown. Frightened enough to run when discovered. The bones, ancient mummified, remains appear in the crypt. Modern human bones burned in the furnace. Connection unknown but certainly suggestive." He closed the notebook and looked at me. "What pattern do you see, Watson?" I considered the matter carefully. "It seems to me that the quarrel between brother and sister is the key. If, as you suggest, Lady Beatrice discovered her maid's infidelity with her brother, it would explain the estrangement, the drinking, and perhaps even the removal of the spaniel as spite. But the other elements, the crypt meetings, the bones, these seem to belong to a different story altogether." "Very good, Watson. You put your finger on the central puzzle. We have two seemingly unconnected narratives here. Either they are indeed separate matters that merely happen to be occurring simultaneously, or there is some link between them that we have not yet perceived. That is what we must determine." The remainder of our journey passed in companionable silence, with Holmes smoking his pipe and staring out at the passing countryside, while I occupied myself with the British Medical Journal, catching up on recent developments in the treatment of tropical diseases. It was just before 7 o'clock when we alighted at the little halt of Shoscombe. The station was scarcely more than a platform with a small wooden shelter, and there was no sign of any official save an elderly porter who eyed our considerable luggage with evident curiosity. "Visitors for the Green Dragon, are you, sirs?" he asked, as he helped load our bags onto a waiting dog-cart. "We are indeed," replied Holmes cheerfully. "Is it far?" "Not above 2 miles, sir. Young Tom there will drive you." He indicated a fresh-faced youth who was holding the horse's head. "Fishing, I suppose?" "That is our hope. We've heard the streams hereabouts are excellent." "They are that, sir, though you'll want to keep clear of the whole lake. Sir Robert don't take kindly to strangers on his land." "So we've been warned. We'll content ourselves with the public waters." The drive to the inn took us along narrow lanes bordered by hedgerows heavy with May blossom. The evening was fine, and the setting sun cast a golden glow over the rolling downs. It was a peaceful scene, quite at odds with the dark mysteries we had come to investigate. The Green Dragon proved to be a substantial old coaching inn, half-timbered and picturesque, and with a large yard and stables at the rear. Our arrival caused some stir as visitors to this remote spot were evidently rare. Josiah Barnes, the landlord, was a stout, jovial man with a red face and shrewd eyes that suggested he missed little of what went on in his corner of Berkshire. "Gentlemen, you're most welcome," he boomed as we entered the low-ceilinged tap room. "Fishing, I understand. Well, you've come to the right place. The trout are rising beautifully this week. I can offer you 2 comfortable rooms overlooking the garden, and my wife's cooking is second to none in the county." We were soon settled in our rooms, which were indeed comfortable, if somewhat small. Holmes insisted on a room at the rear of the inn, overlooking the stables and the lane beyond. Better to observe any comings and goings, as he explained. Chapter 4. The Spaniel's Tale. After a substantial dinner of roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, Holmes suggested we retire to the tap room to become better acquainted with our host. We found Barnes behind the bar, polishing glasses and exchanging pleasantries with a handful of local farmers who had come in for their evening pint. "What about the Hall Lake and the chance of a pike?" Holmes asked casually, as Barnes set 2 tankards of ale before us. The landlord's face clouded immediately. "That wouldn't do, sir. You might chance to find yourself in the lake before you are through." "How's that, then?" "It's Sir Robert, sir. He's terrible jealous of touts. If you 2 strangers were as near his training quarters as that, he'd be after you as sure as fate. He ain't taking no chances, Sir Robert ain't. Not with Shoscombe Prince entered for the Derby." "I've heard he has a good colt," Holmes observed. "Good? That's putting it mild, sir. He's the finest piece of horseflesh I've seen in 40 years. He carries all our money for the race, and all Sir Robert's into the bargain. Why, I've got £20 on him myself, which is more than I can rightly afford, but when you see the Prince move, you can't help yourself." "You've seen him run, then?" Barnes tapped his nose knowingly. "I've seen what I thought was the Prince run, sir, but between you and me, I reckon what I saw was the half-brother. Sir Robert's too clever by half, if you ask me. He'll be showing the slower horse to keep the odds up, then springing the Prince on Derby Day. A dangerous game, surely, if the Jockey Club got wind of it. Ah, but they won't, will they? Not unless someone peaches, and who's going to do that? We're all in it together, in a manner of speaking. Every man in this county has money on that horse. We'll all be ruined if he loses, and we'll all make a tidy sum if he wins." Holmes nodded thoughtfully, taking a long drink of his ale. "By the way, that was a most beautiful spaniel that was whining in the hall as we came in. A Shoscombe breed, unless I'm mistaken." Barnes's face lit up with pride. "I should say it was. That was the real Shoscombe breed, sir. There ain't a better in England. Her ladyship's own breeding, that one is. Primrose, I call her, on account of her colour." "I am a dog fancier myself," said Holmes. "Now, if it is a fair question, what would a prize dog like that cost?" "More than I could pay, sir. It was Sir Robert himself who gave me this one. That's why I have to keep it on a lead. It would be off to the hall in a jiffy if I gave it its head." "Given to you? That seems remarkably generous." Barnes leaned forward conspiratorially, lowering his voice. "Between you and me, sir, I think he just wanted to be rid of it. It belonged to Lady Beatrice, you see. Her favourite it was. But there's been trouble up at the hall, and Sir Robert came storming in here last Tuesday in a fury. Threw the dog at me, said he never wanted to see the creature again. Poor beast has been pining ever since. Won't eat properly, just sits by the door whining. Trouble at the hall, you say? What sort of trouble?" "Well, I shouldn't gossip, but seeing as you're strangers and it'll go no further." Barnes paused, clearly torn between discretion and his love of a good story. "So they say her ladyship's taken badly. Keeps to her room, won't see anyone but her maid, and Sir Robert's like a bear with a sore head, shouting at the servants, galloping about the countryside at all hours. Some say there's been a falling out between brother and sister. Over what? Barnes shrugged. Who can say? The quality have their own ways. But it's not natural, is what I say. Those two were always thick as thieves, and now Lady Beatrice won't even come down to see the horses, which she used to do every single day. It's like she's died, only she hasn't. At that moment the spaniel in question began howling in the hallway, a mournful sound that made several of the locals look up from their drinks. "Excuse me, gentlemen," said Barnes, and went to attend to the animal. Holmes turned to me with a gleam in his eye. We're getting some cards in our hand, Watson," he said quietly. "It's not an easy game to play, but we may see our way in a day or two. By the way, Sir Robert is still in London, I hear. We might perhaps enter the sacred domain tonight without fear of bodily assault. There are 1 or 2 points on which I should like reassurance. Have you any theory, Holmes?" "Only this, Watson, that something happened a week or so ago which has cut deep into the life of the Shoscombe household." "What is that something?" "We can only guess at it from its effects. They seem to be of a curiously mixed character, but that should surely help us. It is only the colourless, uneventful case which is hopeless. Let us consider our data. The brother no longer visits the beloved invalid sister. He gives away her favourite dog, her dog, Watson. Does that suggest nothing to you?" "Nothing but the brother's spite." "Well, it might be so. Or, well, there is an alternative. Now, to continue our review of the situation from the time that the quarrel, if there is a quarrel, began. The lady keeps her room, alters her habits, is not seen save when she drives out with her maid, refuses to stop at the stables to greet her favourite horse, and apparently takes to drink. That covers the case, does it not? Save for the business in the crypt. That is another line of thought. There are 2, and I beg you will not tangle them. Line A, which concerns Lady Beatrice, has a vaguely sinister flavour, has it not? I can make nothing of it. Well, now let us take up line B, which concerns Sir Robert. He is mad keen upon winning the Derby. He is in the hands of the Jews, and may at any moment be sold up, and his racing stables seized by his creditors. He is a daring and desperate man. He derives his income from his sister. His sister's maid is his willing tool. So far we seem to be on fairly safe ground, do we not? But the crypt? Ah, yes, the crypt. Let us suppose, Watson, it is merely a scandalous supposition, a hypothesis put forward for argument's sake, that Sir Robert has done away with his sister. My dear Holmes, it is out of the question. Very possibly, Watson. Sir Robert is a man of an honourable stock, but you do occasionally find a carrion crow among the eagles. Let us for a moment argue upon this supposition. He could not fly the country until he had realised his fortune, and that fortune could only be realised by bringing off this coup with Shoscombe Prince. Therefore he has still to stand his ground. To do this he would have to dispose of the body of his victim, and he would also have to find a substitute who would impersonate her. With the maid as his confidant, that would not be impossible. The woman's body might be conveyed to the crypt, which is a place so seldom visited, and it might be secretly destroyed at night in the furnace, leaving behind it such evidence as we have already seen. What say you to that, Watson? Well, it is all possible if you grant the original monstrous supposition. I think that there is a small experiment which we may try tomorrow, Watson, in order to throw some light on the matter. Meanwhile, if we mean to keep up our characters, I suggest that we have our host in for a glass of his own wine, and hold some high converse upon eels and dace, which seems to be the straight road to his affections. We may chance to come upon some useful local gossip in the process. Barnes proved amenable to our suggestion, and we spent the next hour discussing the finer points of angling, while Holmes gently steered the conversation back to local matters. We learned that the estate employed some 20 people, that Lady Beatrice had lived there for 15 years since her husband's death, that Sir Robert had been a frequent visitor but had only moved in permanently some 5 years ago when his own fortunes collapsed. "He was a major in the Guards, you know," Barnes confided, now on his third glass of port. "Resigned his commission after some trouble with cards. They say he marked the deck during a game at the Guards Club, though nothing was ever proven. But he had to leave all the same. That's when he came to live with his sister. She took him in, settled his debts, gave him an allowance. Without her, he'd be in debtor's prison or worse." Chapter 5. The Morning Experiment. In the morning, Holmes discovered that we had come without our spoon bait for Jack, which absolved us from fishing for the day, though I suspected this was a deliberate oversight on Holmes's part. "I think a morning walk would be more beneficial, Watson," he said with a knowing smile. "The morning air is excellent for the constitution, and I have a mind to see something of the local architecture." About 11 o'clock we set out, with Holmes obtaining leave to take the black spaniel with us. The dog seemed excited to be out, though it kept pulling toward what Barnes had indicated was the direction of Shoscombe Old Place. "This is the place," Holmes said, as we came to 2 high park gates with heraldic griffins towering above them. The gates were impressive examples of ironwork, dating from the early 18th century by my reckoning, and the driveway beyond them curved away through an avenue of ancient oaks. "About midday, Mr. Barnes informs me, the old lady takes a drive and the carriage must slow down while the gates are opened. When it comes through, and before it gathers speed, I want you, Watson, to stop the coachman with some question. Never mind me. I shall stand behind this holly bush and see what I can see." "What exactly are you expecting to see, Holmes?" "I am expecting confirmation, or refutation of a theory, Watson. Kindly take your position and follow my instructions when the time comes." It was not a long vigil. The morning was fine, and I amused myself by studying the griffin emblems on the gates, which showed the wear of centuries. Within a quarter of an hour we heard the sound of hooves and wheels on gravel, and presently we saw the big open yellow barouche coming down the long avenue. It was drawn by 2 splendid high-stepping grey carriage horses, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. The coachman, an elderly man in dark livery, sat upright on the box, and I could see 2 figures in the carriage itself. Holmes crouched behind his holly bush with the dog, whose ears had pricked up at the sound of the approaching carriage. I stood somewhat awkwardly in the roadway, attempting to appear casual while holding my walking stick. A keeper emerged from the lodge and swung open the gates. The carriage slowed to a walk as it passed through, and I was able to get a good look at the occupants. On the left sat a highly coloured young woman with flaxen hair and impudent eyes. She wore a dress of fashionable cut, and her expression was one of almost insolent confidence. At her right was an elderly person with a rounded back and a huddle of shawls about her face and shoulders, which proclaimed the invalid. The figure was hunched forward, and I could see little of the face, which was hidden by both the shawls and a heavy veil. As the horses reached the high road, I stepped forward and held up my hand with what I hoped was an authoritative gesture. The coachman pulled up with a look of surprise. "I beg your pardon," I said, "but could you direct me to the village of Crendell? I fear we have become somewhat lost." Before the coachman could answer, Holmes stepped out from his hiding place and released the spaniel. The effect was immediate and dramatic. With a joyous cry, the dog dashed forward to the carriage and sprang upon the step, its whole body quivering with excitement. For a moment it seemed the reunion between pet and mistress would be touching, and then everything changed. The spaniel's eager greeting transformed to furious rage. It snapped savagely at the black-clad figure, its teeth clicking together inches from the heavily veiled face, and a deep growl emerged from its throat, a sound I had never heard the gentle creature make before. "Drive on! Drive on!" shrieked a harsh voice from within the huddle of shawls, and it was unmistakably the voice of a man, rough and fearful. The coachman, looking thoroughly alarmed, lashed the horses. The carriage lurched forward, nearly throwing the spaniel from the step. Holmes grabbed the dog's collar just in time, and we were left standing in the roadway as the vehicle disappeared in a cloud of dust. "Well, Watson, that's done it," said Holmes, as he fastened the lead to the neck of the excited spaniel, which was still growling and straining in the direction of the departed carriage. He thought it was his mistress, and he found it was a stranger. Dogs don't make mistakes. But it was the voice of a man, I cried, still hardly able to credit what I'd heard. "Exactly. We've added one card to our hand, Watson, but it needs careful playing all the same." I stared at my companion in amazement. "Good heavens, Holmes, are you suggesting that the figure in the carriage was not Lady Beatrice at all?" "I am suggesting precisely that, Watson. The question is, where is Lady Beatrice? But the implications, if that was an impostor, are indeed grave, my dear fellow, very grave indeed. But let us not run ahead of our facts. We have confirmed that someone is impersonating Lady Beatrice. We have the evidence of burned human bones. We have mysterious meetings in a crypt. The picture is becoming clearer, though I confess several important pieces are still missing from the puzzle. We return to the Green Dragon in thoughtful silence, the spaniel trotting dejectedly at our heels. Holmes spent the afternoon in our rooms, smoking pipe after pipe, and occasionally making notes in his pocket-book. I attempted to read, but found my attention constantly wandering to the dark possibilities of the case. Chapter 6. The Evening Inquiry. It was just before dinner that Barnes brought us a note. It was written in a firm hand on good quality paper. "If the gentleman from London would care to meet me at the old chapel at 9 o'clock this evening, I would be obliged. The matter is urgent. J.M." "Mason," said Holmes, examining the note. "Excellent. He has something to report. Watson, I think we shall indeed make that appointment. Bring your revolver, and kindly ensure it is loaded. You anticipate trouble?" "I anticipate nothing, but I am prepared for anything. This case grows darker with every hour, and I should not be surprised if it culminated in violence." We dined early and well, for Holmes insisted that one should never investigate on an empty stomach. As dusk began to fall, we set out on foot, yes, following the directions Barnes had given us to the old chapel. The way led us through a meadow and along a bridle path that skirted the park. "We're not going to approach directly through the park gates?" I asked. "Certainly not. Sir Robert returned from London on the afternoon train. Mason sent word to me, another note that arrived while you were washing for dinner. The master of the house is in residence, and we have no desire to encounter him until we are ready. This path will bring us to the chapel from the north, well away from the main house." The evening was clear but moonless, and as we proceeded the darkness deepened rapidly. Holmes had brought a dark lantern, which he kept carefully shuttered. We could hear the sounds of the countryside around us, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of some small creature in the undergrowth, and in the distance the barking of the kennels at the hall. "There," said Holmes, pointing ahead. Against the darkening sky I could make out the ruined silhouette of what had once been a substantial chapel. Even in the gloom, I could see that the roof had long since fallen in, leaving only the walls standing like the ribs of some ancient beast. A tall, dark figure detached itself from the shadow of a tree and approached us. It was John Mason, looking considerably more agitated than he had appeared in Baker Street. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said in a low voice. "I got your note, Mr. Holmes. I'm glad you've come. Things have taken a turn for the worse." "In what way?" "Sir Robert returned this afternoon in a foul mood. He went straight to the stables, and when he found that the prince had developed a slight cough, he flew into a rage. Blamed young Harvey for not keeping the stables warm enough. Then he went up to see Lady Beatrice, or whoever it is that's in her rooms, and came out looking like thunder." "Did he say anything?" "Not to me, sir, but Stevens told me that Sir Robert has ordered the furnace to be kept burning night and day from now on. Says the house is too cold and bad for her ladyship's health. But Stevens thinks, and I agree with him, that it's so they can destroy more evidence." "How far is this crypt from the house?" Holmes asked. "A good quarter of a mile, sir. The chapel stands in the oldest part of the park, near the boundary wall." "Then I think we can disregard him altogether for the moment." "I can't afford to do that, Mr. Holmes," Mason protested. "The moment he discovers I'm missing from the stables, he'll want to know where I am. He's suspicious of everyone these days, and if he found us here, I see your point. Very well, you can show us the crypt and then leave us. We shall manage on our own." It was pitch dark now, and without a moon, the night was as black as I have ever experienced in the English countryside. Mason led us carefully across the grasslands until the dark mass of the ruined chapel loomed up before us. We entered through what had once been the porch. The door itself had long since rotted away, and our guide, stumbling among heaps of loose masonry, picked his way to a corner of the building. "Mind your step, gentlemen," he cautioned. "The stairs are steep and some of the stones are loose." He was not exaggerating. A steep stone stairway descended into darkness, and as we carefully made our way down, the temperature dropped noticeably. Holmes struck a match, and for a moment its flame illuminated what lay below. The crypt was exactly as Mason has described it, dismal and evil-smelling, with ancient crumbling walls of rough-hewn stone. The ceiling was low, supported by thick pillars that disappeared into the shadows. Along the wall stood piles of coffins, some of lead and some of stone, many bearing the green stains of centuries of dampness. Holmes lit his lantern, and its beam cut through the darkness like a sword, revealing more of the melancholy scene. The light reflected back from coffin plates, many of them adorned with the griffin and coronet of the Fulda family. "You spoke of some bones, Mr. Mason," Holmes said. "Could you show them before you go?" "They're here in this corner," the trainer replied. "He's striding across to the far wall. He stopped suddenly, and even in the dim light I could see his expression of surprise. "They are gone," said he. "So I expected," said Holmes with evident satisfaction. "I fancy the ashes of them might even now be found in that oven which had already consumed a part." "But why in the world would anyone want to burn the bones of a man who has been dead 1,000 years?" asked Mason, clearly bewildered. "That is what we are here to find out," said Holmes. "It may mean a long search, and we need not detain you. I fancy that we shall get our solution before morning." After Mason had departed with many backward glances and evident reluctance to leave us in this grim place, Holmes set to work making a very careful examination of the crypt. He moved systematically along the rows of coffins, his lantern casting strange shadows on the walls. I watched as he examined inscription after inscription, occasionally making notes in his pocketbook. "This is fascinating, Watson," he said at one point. "A complete genealogy in stone and lead. Here is Sir Edmund Fulda, died 1547. And here his son Robert, died 1583. The family has maintained its hold on this land for centuries. All very well, Holmes, but how does this help us? Patience, my dear fellow. Every fact is potentially significant. Ah, here we have something more recent. The coffins from the 18th century. And here, yes, here is what I was looking for. He had reached a leaden coffin that stood upright before what appeared to be a vault entrance. Unlike the others, which showed the wear of centuries, this one appeared to have been recently disturbed. The dust that covered its neighbours was absent, and I could see fresh scratches on the stone floor where it had been moved. Holmes examined the edges of the heavy lid with his lens, his face intent with concentration. Then he drew from his pocket a short jemmy, a box opener, which he thrust into a chink between lid and coffin. "Holmes," I protested, "we cannot. This is sacrilege." "On the contrary, Watson, I believe this coffin was opened very recently, and not for purposes of reverence. Stand back, if you please." He levered back the lid, which seemed to be secured by only a couple of clamps. There was a rending, tearing sound as it gave way, but it had hardly hinged back and partly revealed the contents before we had an unforeseen interruption. Someone was walking in the chapel above. The footsteps were firm and rapid, the step of one who came with a definite purpose and knew well the ground upon which he walked. A light streamed down the stairs, growing brighter by the second, and an instant later the man who bore it was framed in the Gothic archway at the bottom of the steps. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. He was a terrible figure indeed. In the lamplight I could see a man of huge stature, well over 6 feet tall, with massive shoulders and the bearing of a guards officer. His face was strong and heavily moustached, weathered by outdoor life, and his eyes, those eyes were what held one's attention. They blazed with a furious intensity as they swept the crypt, finally fixing themselves upon Holmes and myself with a deadly stare. "Who the devil are you?" he thundered, his voice echoing in the confined space. And what are you doing upon my property?" Holmes made no immediate answer, and Sir Robert, for it could be no other, took a couple of steps forward. In his hand he carried a heavy walking stick, almost a cudgel, which he now raised threateningly. "Do you hear me?" he cried. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The cudgel quivered in the air and I instinctively reached for my revolver. But instead of shrinking back, Holmes advanced to meet him. I had seen my friend face dangerous men before, but never with quite this degree of cool assurance. "I also have a question to ask you, Sir Robert," he said in his sternest tone. "Who is this, and what is it doing here?" With a dramatic gesture he turned and tore the coffin lid fully open, or in the glare of the lanterns, for I had quickly lit my own, I saw a sight that will remain with me until my dying day. A body lay within, swathed in a white sheet from head to foot, but where the sheet had fallen away at one end, dreadful, witch-like features were visible. All nose and chin, the skin shrunken and yellowed, the lips drawn back from the teeth in a horrible grimace. The dim, glazed eyes stared sightlessly from a discoloured and crumbling face. Sir Robert Norberton staggered back with a cry and supported himself against a stone sarcophagus. His face had gone white, and his hands trembled. "How came you to know of this?" he cried. And then, with some attempt to recover his truculent manner, "What business is it of yours?" "My name is Sherlock Holmes," said my companion quietly. "Possibly it is familiar to you. In any case, my business is that of every other good citizen, to uphold the law. It seems to me that you have much to answer for." For a moment Sir Robert seemed about to charge at us like a bull, but Holmes's quiet voice and cool, assured manner had their effect. The baronet's shoulders sagged, and when he spoke again some of the fury had left his voice. "For God, Mr. Holmes, it's all right," said he, though his voice shook slightly. Appearances are against me, I'll admit, but I could act no otherwise. I should be happy to think so, but I fear your explanations must be for the police. Sir Robert shrugged his broad shoulders. Well, if it must be, it must. Come up to the house and you can judge for yourself how the matter stands. I can see there's no avoiding it now. You forced my hand, Mr. Holmes, and perhaps that's for the best. Ah, this secret has been eating at me like a cancer. We made our way up the stone steps and out of the crypt into the blessed relief of the open air. The contrast between the dank charnel house below and the fresh night air above was almost overwhelming, and I breathed deeply, trying to clear my lungs of the cloying smell of decay. Sir Robert led us through the dark park with sure steps, clearly knowing every path and tree. Holmes and I followed, I with my hand on my revolver, though Sir Robert appeared to have lost all his aggressive intent. He walked like a man going to his execution, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. The walk to the house took perhaps 10 minutes. We approached it from the rear, through what appeared to be extensive stables and outbuildings. Lights showed in several windows of the great house beyond, and I could see it was a substantial Tudor manor, much added to in later centuries. Sir Robert led us through a side door and along a corridor hung with portraits of his ancestors, their faces stern and forbidding in the lamplight. We came at last to what I judged, from the lines of polished barrels behind glass covers, to be the gun room of the old house. It was a comfortable chamber, furnished with leather chairs and a substantial desk. The walls were hung with hunting trophies and framed racing prints, and a good fire burned in the grate. Sir Robert indicated that we should be seated, then went to a sideboard and poured himself a substantial measure of brandy, which he downed in one gulp. "I need a moment," he said. "There are others who must be present if I'm to explain this properly. With your permission." "Ah, gentlemen?" Holmes nodded, and Sir Robert left the room. I looked at my friend questioningly. "What do you think, Holmes? Is he going to flee?" "No, Watson. He's going to fetch the other actors in this drama. I believe we're about to have all our questions answered." Some 5 minutes passed, during which Holmes occupied himself with examining the racing trophies that adorned the room. He was particularly interested in a silver cup inscribed Grand National 1899, second place. "A remarkable achievement," he murmured. "To ride one's own horse to second place in the National requires both courage and skill." The door opened, and Sir Robert returned. With him came 2 companions. The first was the florid young woman we had seen in the carriage that morning. Up close she was handsome in a coarse way, with bright blue eyes and features that spoke of a lower social station than one would expect in a lady's maid. The second was a small, rat-faced man with a disagreeably furtive manner and the nervous movements of one perpetually expecting trouble. Both wore expressions of utter bewilderment, which showed that Sir Robert had not yet had time to explain to them the turn events had taken. Chapter 8. The Confession. "There," said Sir Robert with a wave of his hand, "are Mr. and Mrs. Norlett. Mrs. Norlett, under her maiden name of Evans, has for some years been my sister's confidential maid. I have brought them here because I feel that my best course is to explain the true position to you, and they are the 2 people upon earth who can substantiate what I say." "Is this necessary, Sir Robert?" cried the woman, her voice sharp with alarm. "Have you thought what you're doing?" "As to me, I entirely disclaim all responsibility," said her husband, his voice high and querulous. Sir Robert gave him a glance of utter contempt. "I will take all responsibility," said he firmly. "Now, Mr. Holmes, listen to a plain statement of the facts." He settled himself in a chair, and I could see him gathering his thoughts, choosing his words carefully. When he spoke, his voice was calmer than it had been, though an undercurrent of tension remained. "You've clearly gone pretty deeply into my affairs, or I should not have found you where I did. Therefore, you know already, in all probability, that I'm running a dark horse for the Derby and that everything depends upon my success. If I win, all is easy. If I lose, well, I dare not think of that." "I understand the position," said Holmes quietly. "I am dependent upon my sister, Lady Beatrice, for everything. But it is well known that her interest in the estate is for her own life only. She inherited a life interest from her husband, and upon her death the property reverts to his brother, Sir Harold Falder, who lives in Devon. For myself, I am deeply in the hands of the Jews. I have debts of over £30,000. I've always known that if my sister were to die, my creditors would be onto my estate like a flock of vultures. Everything would be seized, my stables, my horses, everything. Well, Mr. Holmes, my sister did die just a week ago." "And you told no one?" The words burst from me involuntarily, and Sir Robert turned to look at me with haunted eyes. What could I do, Doctor? Absolute ruin faced me. If I could stave things off for just 3 weeks, until the Derby, all would be well. The Prince is a certainty, or as near to one as any horse can be. I have £80,000 in bets already laid at odds that are now 40-1. If, when, he wins, I can pay off every creditor, and still have enough to live comfortably. But if the news of Beatrice's death became known, they would seize everything before the race could be run. The horse would likely be scratched, or sold to pay debts, and I would be utterly ruined." "So you conceived this imposture?" Holmes asked. "Her maid's husband, this man here, is an actor. Not a successful one, I might add, but he knows the stage. It came into our heads, it came into my head, that he could, for that short period, personate my sister. It was but a case of appearing daily in the carriage, for no one need enter her room save the maid. It was not difficult to arrange. My sister died of the dropsy which had long afflicted her." "That will be for a coroner to decide," Holmes said sternly. "Her doctor would certify that for months her symptoms have threatened such an end," Sir Robert replied. "Dr. Armitage attended her regularly, and he had warned us repeatedly that her heart could not sustain the strain of the accumulated fluids much longer. When the end came, it was peaceful. She simply failed to wake one morning." "When exactly did she die?" "Last Tuesday morning, a week ago today. I was with her at the end, as was Carrie, Mrs. Norlett. The doctor had been there the previous evening and had said it could be any time. When I found her in the morning, she had passed quietly in her sleep." "And you immediately conceived this plan?" Sir Robert stood and paced to the window, staring out into the darkness. "Not immediately, no. At first, I was simply grief-stricken. Whatever you may think of me, Mr. Holmes, I loved my sister. She was the only person in this world who ever believed in me, who stood by me when every other door was closed. She gave me a home when I had nothing. She paid my debts, endured my tempers, supported my dreams. I would have done anything for her." His voice broke slightly, and I saw genuine emotion in the hard face. For a moment the blusterer was gone, and I glimpsed the frightened, desperate man beneath. "But then," he continued, "the reality of my situation forced itself upon me. The Derby is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And with Beatrice's death, that everything would be lost. Not just the money, not just the horses, but her memory too. This estate, which she loved, would pass to Harold Falder, who cares nothing for it. The stables she helped me build would be sold off. The Shoscombe spaniels she bred with such care would be dispersed. Everything she worked for would be destroyed." "So you decided to delay reporting her death?" Carrie suggested it first, Sir Robert admitted. She said her husband could play the part. They'd been married only a few months before. I had helped arrange the match, as I needed someone I could trust absolutely. Norlet is weak, but he's clever with disguise and voice. And Carrie, well, she had her own reasons for helping me. The woman, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I did it for Lady Beatrice as much as for you, Sir Robert. She wanted you to succeed. She told me so many times. Carrie, she would say, if only Robert could win the derby, it would make him. He would have the confidence, the capital, the position to build a new life. She wanted that for you. And so the imposture was arranged, Holmes said. But you could not keep the body in the house? No, Sir Robert replied, turning back to face us. That was impossible. On the first night, Norlet and I carried her out to the old well house, which is now never used. We were followed, however, by her pet spaniel, which yapped continually at the door. I realised that some safer place was needed. I got rid of the spaniel, gave it to Barnes at the inn, and we carried the body to the crypt of the church. And the mummified remains you found there? There was an ancient Saxon coffin in the corner where we needed to place Beatrice. It contained the mummy of some medieval ancestor. We removed those remains. There was no indignity or irreverence, Mr. Holmes. We treated them with respect, but they could not be left on the floor of the crypt where they might be discovered. So Norlet and I removed them, and he descended at night and burned them in the central furnace. Hence the fragment that was found, I interjected. Yes, we thought we had been thorough, but evidently not thorough enough. And then we opened one of the lead coffins from the 18th century and placed Beatrice inside, as you have seen her. It seemed to me that it would be no unworthy resting place if we put her for the time being in one of the coffins of her husband's ancestors, lying in what is still consecrated ground. Holmes sat in silence for some time, his fingers steepled before him. At length he spoke. There is one flaw in your narrative, Sir Robert. Your bets on the race, and therefore your hopes for the future, would hold good even if your creditors seized your estate. For the first time, Sir Robert showed a flash of his earlier anger. The horse would be part of the estate. What do they care for my bets? As likely as not, they would not run him at all. My chief creditor is, unhappily, my most bitter enemy, that rascally fellow, Sam Brewer, whom I was once compelled to horsewhip on Newmarket Heath. Do you suppose that he would try to save me? He would sell the prince to the first bidder, probably to some foreign buyer, and take pleasure in seeing me ruined. I see. Holmes rose from his chair. Well, Sir Robert, this matter must, of course, be referred to the police. It was my duty to bring the facts to light, and there I must leave it. As to the morality or decency of your own conduct, it is not for me to express an opinion. It is nearly midnight, Watson, and I think we may make our way back to our humble abode. You will report this? Sir Robert asked, his face pale. I must. A death has been concealed, a body has been hidden, and an imposture perpetrated. These are serious matters under English law. However, I will delay my report until tomorrow afternoon, which will give you time to consult with the solicitor and perhaps to make your own report to the authorities. That is the most I can do. Chapter 9. The Resolution. We walked back to the Green Dragon through the dark countryside, neither of us speaking for some time. The events of the evening had been dramatic, and I was still processing all that we had learned. What will happen to him, Holmes? I asked at last. That depends on many factors, Watson. If Lady Beatrice did indeed die of natural causes, as seems likely given her medical condition, then the criminal offence is primarily one of failing to register the death and concealing the body. There is also the matter of fraud. in that Norlet has been impersonating her to maintain the pretense that she lives. These are serious matters, but given the unusual circumstances... He paused, and I could see him considering the various possibilities. There is also the question of the derby, he continued. If Shoscombe Prince does indeed win, it will be difficult for the authorities to act with full severity against a national sporting hero. Public sentiment may play a role, and if Sir Robert uses his winnings to pay all his creditors in full, there may be less enthusiasm for prosecution. Do you think he will flee? No, Watson. Say what you will about Sir Robert Norberton, he is not a coward. He will face the consequences of his actions, and I suspect that, in his heart, he is almost relieved that the secret is out. Such deceptions weigh heavily on the soul. We reached the inn to find it dark and quiet, all the patrons having long since departed. Barnes had left a lamp burning for us in the hallway, and we made our way quietly to our rooms. The next morning dawned bright and clear. After breakfast, Holmes composed a telegram to Inspector Hopkins at Scotland Yard, outlining the basic facts of the case and requesting that he come down to Berkshire to investigate. He also sent a note to Sir Robert informing him of this action. "And now, Watson," he said, "I believe our work here is done. We shall return to London on the afternoon train. I have no doubt that Hopkins will manage the matter competently from here." "What about our fishing?" I asked with a smile. "Alas, the fish of Berkshire must wait for another day, though I think we may take the morning to try the mill stream if you're amenable. After all, we did bring all this tackle." We spent a pleasant few hours by the stream, and I was gratified to land 3 fine trout, though Holmes, as usual, seemed more interested in observing the behaviour of the fish than in actually catching them. It was with some regret that I boarded the train that afternoon. Despite the grim nature of our investigation, I had enjoyed the country air and the sense of adventure that always accompanied Holmes's cases. "An interesting problem, was it not, Watson?" Holmes remarked, as the train pulled away from the station. "Most interesting, though also rather sad. Sir Robert is clearly not an evil man, simply a desperate one." "Indeed, and therein lies the tragedy. He loved his sister, yet he was willing to hide her death and desecrate her remains for the sake of his own financial salvation. It raises interesting questions about the nature of devotion and the lengths to which desperation will drive a man. Do you think the Prince will win the derby? From Mason's account it seems highly probable, and if he does, Sir Robert may well escape the full weight of justice. The English, Watson, have always had a soft spot for sporting heroes." Epilogue. As is now well known, Sherlock Holmes's prediction proved accurate. Shoscombe Prince did indeed win the derby by 2 lengths in what the sporting press described as the most commanding performance seen at Epsom in a decade. Sir Robert Norberton netted some £80,000 in betting coups, and his creditors, seeing their money was now secure, agreed to hold their hand until after the race. Once paid in full, they showed little inclination to press charges against a man who had made good on his obligations. Both police and coroner took a lenient view of the transaction. The medical evidence confirmed that Lady Beatrice had died of natural causes, and Dr. Armitage testified that he had been expecting such an end for several months. The concealment of the death, while irregular and technically criminal, was treated as a desperate act by a man facing ruin rather than as calculated crime. A compromise was reached. Sir Robert received a stiff fine and a severe reprimand, but no criminal charges were filed. The scandal was considerable, of course, and he was quietly asked to resign from his clubs in London. But in the sporting world, where a different code of honour prevails, he was, if anything, elevated in status. I saw him once more, some 2 years later at Newmarket. He had regained something of his former swagger and was supervising the training of another promising colt. He saw me across the paddock and raised his hand in salutation, though he did not approach. "He has outlived his shadows," I remarked to Holmes, who'd accompanied me that day. "So it seems, Watson, though I suspect the memory of his sister, lying in that cold crypt while he gambled on a horse race, will haunt him until his dying day. That is punishment enough for any man." As we turned to leave, I thought of Lady Beatrix Falder, who had loved her brother enough to forgive his faults in life, and whose memory he had dishonoured in death, even while claiming to act in her name. It was a melancholy reflection on the complex nature of family bonds and the terrible choices that desperation can force upon even honourable men. The case of Shoscombe Old Place remains, in my estimation, one of the most psychologically complex investigations that Sherlock Holmes ever undertook. It had everything: mystery, gothic atmosphere, desperate criminals, and a moral ambiguity that made it impossible to simply condemn or condone the actions of those involved. And yet, for all its drama, I sometimes wonder if the most remarkable thing about the case was not the central mystery at all, but rather the small moment when a faithful spaniel, more honest than any human, refused to be deceived by an impostor. Dogs, as Holmes observed, don't make mistakes. If only we humans had such clarity of vision. The end